This has been such a sad, sad situation, hasn't it? 2 years ago, the thing that inspired me to climb up this ladder for the first time, you have a situation where Lance Stroll is the one carrying the team, and Fernando Alonso, he is literally dying out there. Of course, things could easily change, and next season might be a better experience for all concerned. But the here and now is what matters. Aston Martin came to Bahrain with hopes of maybe figuring in the midfield some more. Coming out of it, it was all kinds of depressing. I chose now to discuss this topic because I'm quite sure that you're all quite sick and tired of a Red Bull Verstappen video all over again. Maybe a Sonoda related video, but this one felt quite poignant considering what happened back in 2023 and what happened today, or at least last weekend. It's a very, very jarring juxtaposition. The Sakhir circuit was where this team staked their claim to be Red Bull's closest challengers back in 2023, right when I started making content here. It looked like everything had fallen into place with these regulations. Alonso was strong, Stroll battled through injury to score more points for the team, the car looked genuinely competitive. Maybe the future investment that was being planned was a sign that this team had eschewed its plucky minnow status and had now become a big dog. Maybe it was about to lead to a prosperous time. Well, this time around in Bahrain, they did not mirror anything close to that 3rd place and then 6th place. No, it was more like 16th and 18th. But what? So you do have to ask, what happened? Well, as you might be able to tell from the length of this video, a lot of yapping is about to say that, a lot happened. Well, I mean, for starters, the characteristics of the first few circuits on the calendar certainly didn't help Aston Martin's car, nor did the fact that Fernando Alonso suffered 2 DNFs that were mostly beyond his control. He has now, statistically, had an even worse start than he had with Minardi 24 years ago. Worse than Minardi. And according to Fernando, the main issue surrounding the AMR25 is related to the slow speed corners, and it's now spread to basically the car's fundamentals, them being flawed, something the team needs to work on immediately, so that means he's not dying in those sections of track. The high speed corners are something you want to be good at, and to be fair, this car is fairly solid in those areas, but when it comes to the low speed corners, if you're not good there, then you are indeed headed toward a death sentence, because if you can't master those corners, and especially with these cars which are big, lumbersome, and very, very groggy in the low speed stuff, then you're on a hiding to nowhere. It's all about mechanical grip, what keeps you on the track and connects all of that speed and aero slick into ultimate lap time. And when that's missing, the car either understeers or oversteers or both, making exiting slower and every lap more painful. But when it does get up to the places where higher speed turns matter more, the car is more in their favour. It's okay. Not amazing, but good enough. Now, the upcoming Saudi Arabian Grand Prix might be a little bit more forgiving for this team, in that high-speed corners are somewhere that we might see at least one Aston Martin make a decent attempt to get into Q3. But after that, with Miami, you know, that little awkward, twisty-turny speedy section before the back straight, that is going to be where Aston will lose a heck of a lot of time. The only way they can save this is that they get some sort of upgrade which is in step with what they did, instead of them falling back like they did in Imola last year. But here is the thing. Will that come this year? Is it a guarantee? Will Adrian Newey cast a beady eye out of pity for this team and say just that one little word that sets them off in the right direction and saves weeks in development time? Well, I've got some bad news for you if you're an Aston Martin fan. Mike Crack, the former team principal, now chief trackside officer, has made it very clear that the legendary designer will not be coming to the rescue. As indeed he lays out, Crack, right here. Normally, as soon as the season starts, journalists ask about upgrades and the upgrade race is on. We haven't seen that over the past years. We're not in a hurry. We want to look at it properly. There is some stuff in the pipeline. We will bring them when they are ready. As I said, it's sometimes better also that you consolidate a little bit where you are to understand your car, and then move on from there. So they are in the pipeline. They will come soon. Will Newey work on the 2025 car? I don't know. It's something that, again, it's a resource split. He has started quite late for the 2025 car, and the concentration is on 2026. Now, okay, honestly, I get that. It's a reasonable, sensible answer. Not inspiring or plucky or aggressive, but it's a logical one because Adrian, he did arrive at Aston Martin 2 months into the embargo being lifted on next year's development, so he has got to catch up in that regard. And then, of course, Newey has said that a reliance on computational design is more important than ever, that his pen and paper will only go so far. But that being said, doing all of this, it's not exactly a unique strategy. Williams is the poster child of focusing on next year, paying not much mind to this year, but still getting a decent return anyway. Not to mention, they've now got their ducks in a row with a stable workforce and brand new workflows in place to prepare for next year. Even if the title sponsor is the butt of many jokes that I still do not understand to this day. I just don't get it. Jeer at me all you want. With Aston Martin, you feel like the opposite is the case in terms of a stable workforce. Okay, their brand new in-house wind tunnel is getting up to speed, and there is a lot to be hopefully optimistic about for next year. And then with Honda stepping in to replace Mercedes, Aramco upping their involvement with their synthetic fuels initiative, it might lead to a future stuff or staff that might be here ready to go in 2026, but not relevant here and now. Because you really do feel like this team is caught in the middle of something, that it's headed toward the end of one relationship and the beginning of a new one. But you really do have to look at the fundamentals of what they have right now, that at the moment, they do have similar specifications of parts to what the likes of Williams has. The gearbox, rear suspension, and power unit from one Mercedes. But as I will touch upon later on in this video, that might not be all it seems, and whether or not Toto looks at Aston Martin and says, what's the point of even giving them the best parts if they're about to bugger off in the next few months? Or forget you, Papa Stroll. It certainly doesn't help that Red Bull had the last laugh at the end of the day in regards to technical minds. Dan Fallowsand, the man who spearheaded the AMR23, not only was he pushed out of the F1 team and sent off to work somewhere else within Aston Martin, but now he no longer works for them entirely. He left recently and then posted a Substack, which passively aggressively summated that working in F1 is not for the faint of heart. Clearly, I think he found a little bit of inspiration for writing that article, that maybe he was airing some personal grievances without naming names. And that, yes, of course, you'd be right to remove that man because, again, after 2024 in the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix when Aston Martin's ultimate big upgrade really fell off, and in 2024, throughout the entire season, they brought the most parts out of any other team, then naturally there was going to have to be a change of scene, and the final nail in the coffin was of course to do with the fact of the arrival of Adrian Newey. That sure, he might not be working on the 2025 car right now, it doesn't necessarily mean he won't have any influence on the technical department in of itself. And with Dan Fallows, let's just say that he recalls their time working together at Red Bull, and it might not have been that great. According to some reports, he did not receive the seal of approval from Newey, him taking a dim view on Fallows. They both worked together when Fallows was the chief engineer of aerodynamics at the time, before then leaping over to Aston, and yeah, so much for that then. Fallows was clearly being lined up as a scapegoat, possibly alongside Mike Crack, but Crack has seemingly survived, likely because his management style clicked better with upper leadership. Still though, he has been removed from the technical side of things, which is sort of his bread and butter, because at heart, Mike Crack is an engineer. That's what he found his groove in Formula 1 with BMW. That does say a lot, that Mike endured not because of what he actually studied for at university and cut his teeth with in the 2000s, but he was able to save his bacon for all of the other things trackside. And it really does show that Newey's shadow is looming large over these people, and Crack is lucky to still have a job, now having nothing to do with Adrian. This level of change and transition is not helped with the whole thing revolving around Enrico Cardile's hiring being put on pause until mid-July. As you may have been aware, Ferrari's former technical lead was destined to join Aston to work on the 2026 car alongside Newey. Maybe the two men got themselves acquainted when all of the talks about Adrian going to Ferrari were going on in the background, but then they ultimately collapsed because Adrian wanted absolute control of who he could hire and fire, and then Vasseur said no. But the Italian courts ruled that Cardile had breached his contractual obligations to not work for another team before a certain date, and then his arrival got kicked down the road. So you can imagine that's not really ideal for the team now, is it? Now, of course, I can easily imagine that some of you out there might be just pulling out your own spanner of speculation and just going, oh, what does it matter, Law? It's clearly obvious what's going on here. They're just deliberately nobbling their car, so that means they can get good wind tunnel and ADTR time for next year, and yeah, Law, why are you being so naive? Well, I understand why you might want to think that way. That is a perfectly logical thought, but from what we're hearing from the likes of Mike Crack and others, and Andy Cowell, They are genuinely trying this year to score points. There is still prize money to be had, remember, $10 million per position. But I can understand the whole ATR thing. It could explain why Fernando Alonso have been somewhat calm amidst the very real danger of the team being listed as a backmarker. But something tells me that the plans being outlined by the team, it just goes to show that this dip in performance is just really down to their current state of flux. That, yes indeed, this fall in pace is genuine, and not some kind of simple non-committal to this year. Because according to Crack again, they are trying their damnedest to try and get some good results in 2025, so that means they can then have a steady platform to go on to next year. Kind of like what Williams are doing right now, and I don't mean to keep bringing back Williams, but they're in a similar boat as well as being Mercedes customers, and their fortune seems to be a lot more consistent and a lot more plucky, and right now, given how small they are in comparison to now Aston Martin's bloated entity, yeah, they're a lot more lithe, and they're able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps. I mean, the cave is a lot nice looking now, and the box of scraps is slightly bigger, and it's got some newer parts, but you know what I mean. Relationships and perspective. It's a matter of that, really. The issues facing the team, though, going into their new chapter, apparently is just causing so many different pieces falling into place, it's having a knock-on effect, which may explain why Fernando said back in October that Newey would 100% face an impossible challenge in trying to repair the already developed 2025 car. Maybe that's another reason why he isn't working on it. Well, I mean, if it's a lost cause, then why bother working on it? Just put all of your resources into next year. Don't even bother casting your BDI on it. Here's Mike Crack again, explaining what specifically is the major drain on resources for 2025. Ahem. We are also in a bit of a special case. We will change our engine manufacturer and we make our own gearbox in 2026. That's all not helping, so we have to balance these things. We have the 26 regulations coming, we have a couple more races with these regulations, and it doesn't help to stir in that now and to find out what went right and what went wrong. We are still working on the development. When there is something ready, then we will bring it. Now, usually with these kind of things, I treat what Mike Crack says with a little hint of skepticism, more than the foam of doubt, simply for the fact that he was constantly gaslighting us about Lance Stroll the last couple of years. But when it comes to his wheelhouse and the art of engineering, I am more inclined to trust him. Yeah, because that's what he studied for. Because I also recall him claiming that making your own gearbox can cost upwards of $9 million a year. That's a big chunk of change to sacrifice just so that you know that the transmission will work perfectly with the incoming Honda power units for 2026. It's forward thinking, sure, but it comes at a price. Focus, time, and performance right now. So maybe that's why Lance Stroll doesn't seem too fussed about what's going on right now, that maybe it's resorted to type where Aston Martin are back at the end of the midfield or maybe a backmarker situation, that the onus isn't squarely on him. That means he can just focus on himself, try and rebuild, him now potentially being the fittest he has been in quite a few years with a brand new race engineer that he's gelling well with. The onus is not on him, and he is not in the public limelight anymore. He is the guy who got those 10 points on the board for Aston Martin at all. Yeah, Fernando Alonso had his own misfortunes and whatnot, but at the end of the day, Lance brought home those points, so that's going to easily give him that little bit of extra morale as well. And even though Fernando has had some decent radio sound bites and his antics with the steering wheel in Bahrain really turning heads for all the wrong reasons, this year definitely feels like there is real struggle in balancing what is needed later and needed right now, with new team principal Andy Cowell very determined to build a strong foundation for the future, rather than trying to fight on with a concept that has proven to be an utter failure, and of course them departing with Mercedes. And then there's also the whole situation regarding their current supplier of the entire rear end of the Aston. And this partnership, it's not a new thing. This didn't come around in 2021. This partnership between Team Silverstone and Mercedes-Benz has been going on way longer than the relationship with Williams by a good 4 years. It started in 2009. Because we all remember that Brawn managed to get that deal with having Mercedes engines. Force India, they already had that going on. This means that the technical framework around the back end of the car is pure Mercedes, including that bizarre bump on the 2021 car to accommodate that engine, going against the actual fundamentals of the aerodynamics that they had at the time. Them just evolving the pink Mercedes of 2020, but just lifting it at the back a little bit to correspond with the regulations. It's been a long-lasting dynamic though. However, some analysts and insiders have noted that the parts Aston receives, whilst technically identical to those used on the factory Mercedes car and other customers, may not be as integrally tuned to their specific chassis philosophy. a subtle disadvantage. This nuance becomes really critical at a time when Aston Martin is really trying to go it alone and really make itself an independent works team with Honda and try and gain some credibility. All that credibility has gone out the window since the middle of 2023, the moment when they announced that they were going to be partnering with Honda 2.5 years hence. And yeah, let's just say that Aston Martin was not their priority. Because Aston Martin were really loud and early regarding their announcement in switching to Honda power in 2026. And that didn't just shape their future, it may have quietly poisoned the present. What happens when your in-laws find out you're filing for divorce and you just got on the rooftops and shouted to the whole world about it? It's hard not to imagine that Mercedes might have grown a little bit sour about this situation, that in a couple of years' time this team is not going to be working with you, so why should you be putting loads of time and resources and personnel to make sure they're up to speed? Now, I'm not saying they're sabotaging Aston Martin's car, I'm just saying that the onus on parts that they are trying to share with their many customers, because let's not forget, not just Mercedes, but they also supply 3 other teams with power units and 2 of them with an entire rear package. They are spread thin, so they do need to prioritize those that, they're going to have a long-term relationship with. It may be a coincidence coupled with the misdirection of aero development, but after the Spanish Grand Prix of 2023, which took place a week or so after the announcement, after which Aston did not at all reflect the remarkable effects prior to the Monaco Grand Prix, it really was the beginning of the downfall in 2023. Those podiums, those regular podiums, no longer a thing. Now, although there is no direct evidence of deliberate obstruction or hindrance, it is quite safe to assume that, at the very least, the collaborative working environment would not be nearly as harmonious because, again, this was a very long-term relationship, 14 years. Mercedes and Team Silverstone were entwined with each other at that time, and now they were having to just pull themselves apart, and then suddenly Aston Martin fall off, and then the aerodynamic thing falls off. It just completely unraveled. This might also go some way as to explain why Mike Crack is saying there is a move toward full independence, but also a recognition of the limitations they currently face under the existing arrangement with an outgoing supplier. It might also go some way to explain why the car right now is so bad in low-speed corners. The mechanical grip is not there, with parts that are either not the best quality or compatible with the parts that are made in-house already. Now, okay, I might have gotten a little bit cynical myself, but let's bring it back to 2 of the most important people that will be feeling the effects the most: the drivers. Whilst Lance Stroll may not be all that concerned with the performance of the car as long as it looks like he's trying his best and working well with the crew and new engineer, do spare a thought to the guy meant to lead them to glory, would you? For Fernando Alonso, Aston Martin was meant to be the redemption arc, not a retirement tour, but a final shot at matching a competitive car with his relentless ambition. You would have just thought that finally, Aston Martin had provided Alonso a car that would mean that he could just get rid of the curse that had been dogging him for such a long time, that he'd been at the right team at the wrong time. At first it looked great, but by 2024 that hope had faded into yet another chapter of what might have been. And while some call it very sad, you get the feeling Alonso would hate being pitied. This isn't just about a slow car, it's about a driver who once again finds himself in an environment riddled with instability, technical misfires, and strategic uncertainty. Now, he is staying calm, he is trying his best to remain professional and reasonable and not lash out at the people who work closely to him, but surely he must know that time is ticking. Now, even though he is in phenomenal shape and his personal trainer is saying that he's even fitter than he was back at Ferrari, there are ongoing reports that he has been complaining of back issues, and it may go to show that even though you are trying your best to be fitter than you possibly were back in your late 20s and early 30s, age sometimes just does not care. And what makes this especially cruel is that all of this is really out of Fernando's hands. The AMR25 is just simply not a car cut out to be fighting for 5th place in the Constructors at the moment. It's not inherently bad everywhere. Like I said, its high-speed performance is solid, but everything else has just rendered Fernando somewhat powerless on track and visibly deflated off it. He's not got that spark of Spanish passion or fiery anger that we saw during his tempestuous second stint with McLaren. Overlay this with the spectre of Adrian Newey. Again, he's not working on this year's car, but his influence is starting to spread amongst the personnel. The narrative takes on some kind of Shakespearean hue. Newey, long revered as F1's most brilliant mind, didn't greenlight Dan Fallowsand, the very person who built the car that Fernando got so many podiums with, and who many believed was Alonso's best shot at sustained competitiveness. He's now gone gone, ousted under pressure, and maybe indirectly judged by Newey's lofty standards. And I should know because, well, you know. So even though Newey is looking forward to working with Fernando, a personal dream of his influence on the technical personnel might have also had an impact on Fernando and therefore lowering his morale. So by helping Alonso, he's not helping Alonso. It's a very complicated web going on at Aston Martin that I don't think either man knows how to pass. He's stuck in limbo, too sharp to retire, too savvy to lash out, and too experienced to fake optimism. And with Aston Martin's focus now squarely pinning all of its hopes and dreams on this Honda and Aramco partnership working at full force right from the get-go, Alonso's future is again in the hands of this team, whether or not it will even work. Because he really does deserve a car to be proud of and get that elusive win number 33 before he then hangs up his helmet for good, which is something that he has said that next year is going to be a very important milestone in his career and will really dictate whether or not he remains in the sport. If it goes well, he may stick around for a couple of years. If not, and it's just another year, which is more of the same of what we're getting right now, then he will definitely retire. He's been giving it a good go, but, you know, he can only last for so long. I mean, he lasted 4 seasons at McLaren, despite them really on a road to nowhere, so I think a similar length of time could be here as well. So what could you say really caused the fall of Aston Martin as we see it right now? Well, it's not simply one thing, it's everything. A team that briefly soared, now trying to become a powerhouse without the foundations to sustain it, like building a rocket ship with no runway to land it on. A car concept that collapses in slow-speed corners, scapegoating the instigators in their mind at their false dawn to then being locked into transitional relationships with suppliers like Mercedes, whilst loudly beating the Honda drum. It's a huge case study in how ambition without cohesion can easily unravel even the most best-intended of projects. This isn't just a team in flux, this is a team caught between 2 different timelines. They're chasing results with a compromised package whilst looking to next year in the hopes that things will turn around, them being a full works operation, not having to rely on an outside supplier for such a fundamental part of the car, and therefore they are in charge of their own destiny with partners who want to win. It might come up with the goods, it might not. And, yeah, Formula 1 doesn't wait. And neither will Max Verstappen if, and that's a big if, he decides to walk away from Red Bull and even entertain a Honda-Newey reunion at Aston Martin, considering that Mercedes might be about to close the door on him. Because let's be very clear, Max Verstappen does not do transitions. He expects a team that is firing on all cylinders immediately. And with Adrian Newey having established himself, surely some of the groundwork would have already been done, at least in the technical department, which has been the main bugbear over at Red Bull, simply for the fact that Pierre Vachey's team were trying to eschew themselves of Adrian Newey and beat their own drums so many times that really narrow performance windows are really, really key. We are not going to change. And Max says, change them anyway. And then no. And then change them anyway. No. Okay, maybe. We'll focus on Yuki's car a bit. Checo was right. So if Aston Martin can't sort out its own internal turbulence, establish a clear technical vision, and prove it can execute, then even the arrival of Adrian Newey won't be enough to turn the ship around in time for next year, ready for a potential coup of Verstappen. And whilst Andy Cowles' vision seems a lot more grounded than previous utterances from Mike Cragg, the task at hand is a sizable one, with a team which is also much more sizable themselves. Because even though you might be thinking they are still the small fry, plucky team that was once Jordan Grand Prix, or heck, even like Racing Point a few years ago, they're not anymore. Don't treat them as underdogs, because they're the big dogs. They want to be big dogs, so we should treat them like big dogs. The ultimate reason why Aston Martin has fallen down so hard is just proving that execution is everything. Actions speak louder than words. And right now, they are executing the perfect blueprint for disappointment. But I am not writing Aston Martin off forever. Things could easily change. The rise might return akin to 2023, especially considering that the Saudi Crown Prince is potentially going shopping for a Formula 1 team. They couldn't buy Formula 1 itself, so why not do the next best thing and maybe get into bed a little bit more with the team that you've been cooperating with the likes of Aramco. So I wouldn't be surprised that even though Papa Stroll retains control of the team, that, the Saudi Arabian government might decide to, pony up some more money as well. So yeah, it might rise again just through sheer will and money, which might seemingly be the reason why the FIA president's deputy walked out. Mr. Sulleyem's sheer will being far too much to bear. To find out why I reckon that this news of Robert Reid leaving is much worse than you might think, despite his relative anonymity, watch this video next, straight after this one.